This has to be one of the best, if not the best warrior build in Path of Exile 2. It destroys and explodes packs of mobs in one single click, almost regardless of level, and it has insane single target damage both early and late game to help you beat some of these bosses that are extremely difficult. I've seen a lot of people struggling with the warrior, especially early game, and I have a bunch of things I'm going to show you along with the build, the skill tree, and everything included to take your warrior from absolute garbage like mine was early and turn them into this absolute god. First, I'm going to go over how the build works before I get into all the skills. Before I go into detail, I'm going to explain exactly kind of how the build works so that way you have an idea before we just start jumping into everything. So we're going to be leveraging Giant's Blood here. What that actually lets you do is use two-handed weapons. We can now wield two-handed weapons instead of just one. Keep in mind the requirement here is that triple attribute requirements will be needed. So if we take a look, I'm currently using two-handed weapons to really try and increase my overall damage. Now you do have to keep in mind that it requires triple the actual attribute requirement. So you can see this is a level 24 weapon with 38 strength. Since we're able to use two of these, that 38 strength will require us to actually have 114 strength, which we do, which is why we can wield both of these weapons. This is doing a decent bit more damage. So that's something major with the build. We're going to be using Leap Slam to apply stun consistently to enemies very quickly and jump around the map. We'll be using Bone Shatter as our primary mob clear, meaning all the enemies that are primed for stun with our Leap Slam, shown by the little light ball over their heads. If we get them in a pack and hit one of them, they will essentially all explode, given we have the Impact Shockwave gem. Also, Herald of Ash, once activated, it's going to help us to explode enemies in a fiery inferno all across your screen and ignite them. And finally, we're going to be using Perfect Strike early on, which will then replace with Hammer of the Gods. But Perfect Strike is going to be our earlier game single target damage monstrosity. This thing can do 10-20,000 early game in a single hit, allowing you to completely annihilate bosses very quickly. I didn't use this a little bit earlier on and is a must-have for any warrior build, period. So again, the build is super overpowered because you have Perfect Strike that you can use to completely annihilate single targets and bosses. We can use Leap Slam to jump all around the map very quickly and prime large packs very easily. And then once we're primed for stun, we then Bone Shatter them. They all explode, and then they extra explode while we have Herald of Ash activated, meaning you just blow up packs of enemies in a single swing, which allows us to clear a lot of the early, middle, and even some later game content as you get into the higher levels like 40 and 50. One mistake you can always make is not looking your best, especially with the great deals this season. Today's sponsor is Manscaped, who have already conquered 22 million balls. And they've hooked me up with a Performance Package 5.0 that includes some of the best things you will ever use. First, the famous Lawnmower 5.0, which has dual skin-safe blades that come with an upgraded trimmer for the best performance. It also comes with a foil blade to leave you with the sleekest, best finish for any possible shave, which also includes an LED, meaning I can shave in the dark. You also get the Weed Whacker 2.0, which is designed to easily handle those bothersome nose hairs that you just can't get. You also get some Crop Soother and Preserver. The Soother is an aftershave lotion, and the Preserver is basically ball deodorant. That way you can treat your fellas the right way. With the Performance Package, you also get the 2.0 boxers. Here, I'll show you. Just kidding, they're right here and they're extremely comfortable. And the Shed 2.0 to make carrying everything easy and on-the-go friendly. Whether to treat yourself or someone else, head over to manscaped.com and get the Performance Package 5.0 today. When you use my code CreativeGamingYT, you'll get 20% off plus free international shipping and all those free gifts. Trust me when I say this, your balls are going to thank you. So one of the things I'm going to touch on is the skills. So I'm going to go over the basic skills and you can kind of branch off and do how you want to. There will be a build link in the description that you can follow for all of the exact details, and I will make constant updates to it. So I took these armor nodes early. You can kind of decide whether or not you want to take them. They're not really important, but we're going to take the melee track first. So we're going to increase our melee damage with all of these nodes right off the bat and go straight into brutal. So that way we get that increased stun buildup and increased melee damage and strength. Strength is going to be important, especially for once we get Giant's Blood, to be able to get a bunch of health, because strength gives us maximum life and also qualifies us to use our weapons when they require higher attributes with Giant's Blood later in the game. Another thing is we also take some of these important stun buildup nodes. You want to take as much stun buildup as you can get so you can stun enemies quickly to then hit them with your bone shatter and blow up packs of enemies. That's really important. You don't have to take this immediately, but it helps survivability early game. It's taking 15% increased armor here and then 80% increased armor from equipped body total, which really bumps up your total armor percentage. We're then going to go straight into more melee damage and smash, so we get again increased melee damage again. More here, we continue to take these strength nodes where needed. If you need to change these later on for dexterity or something, so you can use a different support gem, feel free to come back and do that, but we take strength primarily. Now there's two ways you're going to want to play this. Early game, before you start using your two-handed weapon, if you want to use your one-handed sword and shield, you can most definitely do that. That's what I did early game. You can take some of these block nodes, and you're also going to want to take these single one-handed damage nodes early. This is if you take these one-handed weapon nodes up here and not worry about these two-handed weapon nodes down at the bottom, you can definitely do that so that way you can block and use your shield very easily. So I'd recommend using the one-hand sword and shield early. Take these nodes, and then once you swap over to a two-handed weapon, once you get a good enough one, you can then swap down here to the two-handed weapon for a lot of the extra damage. We're already in the two-handed stage, so we'll take these, which again gives us increased two-handed damage. You can take Shockwave if you'd like, but also make sure you take Singular Purpose. Again, we get more damage. We get rid of some of our attack speed, but for 40% increased damage, which is a solid trade-off. We then continue on to take the strength nodes here. We do want to take Warcry cooldown speed, empowered attack damage, and bolstering yell, so that way our empowered attacks deal even more damage. But we're also going to take more strength, and again beef right here for additional strength. Now eventually, and this will be in the build planner, you're going to want to come over here and take your 15% increased armor and the plus 15 strength here again for the Giant's Blood requirements a little bit later. And the same goes for later, potentially coming over here, and recommend taking these strength nodes into Resolute Technique. This means your hits can't be evaded and you don't miss, but you never deal critical hits. It's a solid trade-off though. Because of the speed of your two-handed weapons, you're going to want to take this so that way you don't miss, because when you miss, it's frustrating and costing you a lot of damage, and it's very annoying actually. So we're going to continue along here. Take the attack damage and reduced attack speed, and you're going to want to take every single one of these, meaning we give up 1, 2, 3, 9 total percent attack speed, which is a lot, but we get increased stun buildup, but we get a total of 97% increased attack damage for 9% attack speed trade-off. You can't beat that. That's way too much damage to ignore. And then eventually we'll want to come down here once we get a little bit higher level. And at this point, you should have already swapped to a two-handed weapon well before this and swapped these skills up here to your bottom ones once you feel comfortable with the two-handed weapons. And then sometime in level maybe like 30s, you can come down here and take Giant's Blood. You can take it earlier if you want, but once you get comfortable, you can take this. And again, as long as you take a lot of these strength nodes and meet the requirements on strength for your weapon, again, it requires 38 strength, which means we need 114 strength total to wield both of these, since it does triple the requirement. Even if you swap down to weapons with not as much power, you still end up overall doing more damage. And then finally, even as we level up, I'll add again some more nodes in the build planner, but we'll also eventually want to take this avatar fire node, so we deal 75% of damage converted to fire damage, which once we get that transfer to fire damage, we'll then take some of these nodes for increased chance to ignite, and some of these nodes farther up here for ignite and additional fire damage, which synchronizes with our Hammer of the Gods a little bit later in the game. But for leveling, this is the best, solid, and fastest clearing skill path for Warrior so far. Next, I'm going to go over some of the gems and exactly what you want. And again, this stuff is in the build planner. It can vary on really what you want or need early game, because you can move these around kind of at will. So for Mace Strike, you can really put any of the recommended ones here early. This is what you'll be using as a primary skill. As your primary attack for basically all bosses at the beginning, you're going to be spamming Mace Strike nonstop. That's just kind of what you have to do. That's really the only viable option you have early game until you unlock some new skills. Again, we have Mace Strike here with the two-handed weapon, which then goes to the two-handed weapon. Once you get that upgrade, we're going to be using Rolling Slam primarily as our beginning ability to stun people quickly. You can see Rolling Slam you unlock at a very early level at skill gem 1. So until you unlock Leap Slam, Rolling Slam is going to be our primary way to prime enemies for stun, allowing us to use our Bone Shatter to annihilate packs of enemies. Now keep in mind I might have some level 2 gems in here, so put in here what you can if there are level 2 gems. I currently am using Fist of War, so that way attacks with supported skills are ancestrally boosted, which means you get 20% more damage and area of effect the more enemies you have a chance to prime for stun. Additionally, you can put Magnified Effect, which upgrades your area of effect 40% more. That is a great option as well. But that's what I kind of ran early. Now Bone Shatter our next ability, so once we prime enemies with Rolling Slam, we're then going to Bone Shatter enemies once they're ready to be stunned. This is going to cause a shockwave to deal a bunch of damage to enemies. And then this is one of the big important parts. You need to make sure you have the Impact Shockwave support gem here. So what this does is create an aftershock when you heavy stun an enemy. So once you hit one of these enemies with Bone Shatter, they all get hit by the shockwave and the aftershock, which deals a ton of damage and essentially blows up packs of enemies. We also want Execute here, so that supported skills deal 40% more damage with hits against enemies that are on low life. Again, this is an arbitrary gem, you can swap this, but Impact Shockwave is the important one. Infernal Cry allows us to empower our attacks. You can see here it empowers the next melee attack you perform, and empowered attacks gain 25% of damage as fire damage per 5 power of enemy in range up to 100%. So essentially you want to cast Infernal Cry with a bunch of enemies around you, and then that empowered attack then does an extreme amount of buffed damage. Again, you can use this on bosses as well. So here the main gem to focus on is Corrupting Cry. Once you unlock Sunder, you can use this as a primary AoE clearer, and here we can use the Jagged Ground support gem, so we get a 50% chance to create Jagged Ground that lasts 4 seconds. And if you look, this actually slows the movement speed of enemies in the area, so you have more maneuverability. Eventually, then we'll unlock Leap Slam. This is going to be our primary ability once we unlock it to start priming enemies for stun, which will take place of our Rolling Slam, which means we'll just be casting primarily Leap Slam now. And you can use Overpower here. So hits with supported skills cost 50% more stun buildup, which is great because, again, we're priming enemies for stun with this to Bone Shatter them. So this is exactly what you want. Then we have Herald of Ash. As soon as you're able to unlock Herald of Ash, you want to make sure you unlock it. Not only unlock it, but activate it by right-clicking it. I went about 15 levels without activating this, and it cost me a lot of easy fights. I could have been breezing through the easier content. You want the Vitality support node here, so you regenerate 1% of life per second. Allows you to get some free life regen, and also Clarity, so you get increased mana regeneration rate as well while this is active. Shield Charge I'm currently using just to move around the map, so it doesn't really matter what gems you put here. I just use this as primarily movement skill. And then again, Perfect Strike, which we use early once we unlock it to deal that insane single target damage. What this does is let you charge up your weapon and then hit enemies doing a decent amount of damage, but if you perfectly time the actual swing with the animation, you deal an increased amount of damage, so much that it's actually insane. Now this is our main boss killer skill. So here we have the support gem's window of opportunity. So we have a 20% shorter perfect timing window for the actual skill itself, but the skill deals 50% more damage when released with perfect timing. So it takes a little bit. It's trading your skill for actually being able to time the skill for more damage. So if you can time it, throw this on, you're going to be crazy buffed. Next, Fire Infusion. So that supported attacks gain 25% of damage as extra fire damage, and takes away damage that we don't use. So we get a free 25% extra fire damage, which Perfect Strike actually has. And then we want Close Combat. So supported skills deal 25% more attack damage for enemies within 1 meter. Next, we'll go over the gear and some stuff you kind of want to look for. So we'll start off with some of the generic stuff. So obviously your belt, we have max life and armor here. For mana, this doesn't really necessarily matter, but obviously you want good healing and mana potions. Ideally for both, you want 3 main things. You want increased amount recovered, which we have on both our mana and our health. We also want the reduced charges per use, meaning we get more charges that we can use and use our healing and mana potions many more times. And then for our amulet, especially early game, you're going to be pressed to find just about anything. Stuff like life regeneration per second is big, mana regeneration, and maximum life. For our rings, we want things like adds to physical attack damage. That's stuff that helps a lot early. So I do the early rotation is going to be with your one-handed sword shield. This is going to be using a combination of your mace strike with your block. Your block is important early before we start dealing a ton of damage. Also combining that with your rolling slam. Your rolling slam again is then going to prime enemies, so you can train a bunch of enemies, get them kind of in a pack, cast your rolling slam on them. You'll then prime an enemy for stun, and as soon as you see that little shiny icon above them that they're primed for stun, We're then going to cast our Bone Shatter, which will just blow up every enemy on the screen, making it the best clearing ability for the warrior. We can use our Shield Charge once we unlock that to get around the map a little bit quicker, but that will be our primary mob clearing ability throughout all of the individual worlds. And then once you get to bosses, you're gonna have to combine your block with your mace strike. If you use Rolling Slam and then you use Infernal Cry before you use your Bone Shatter, your Bone Shatter should be empowered, meaning you'll do a lot more damage to make sure to clear the screen, although you probably don't necessarily need to do that early. For our bosses, you're going to be primarily using your mace strike and your block. It's going to be a combination of dodging mechanics and just mace striking the boss. Simple as that. That's the best way for single target damage earlier as a warrior. It's a little bit of a struggle, but that's honestly the best way. Stick with the process. It gets a lot easier once you unlock later skills. Now, once before and after you unlock Giant's Blood, you'll eventually unlock Leap Slam. Now, Leap Slam now takes essentially a place of Rolling Slam. You can still use the Rolling Slam, but ideally we can leap into the air, avoid a decent bit of damage, and just land on enemies extremely quickly from far distances, cause them to get primed for stun, and then Bone Shatter them much quicker than with Rolling Slam. This way we can clear packs of mobs even quicker. Also, Sunder is a great ability that helps you mob clear enemies if you don't have enemies that are primed for stun, and can slow enemies at the same time, allowing you to kind of figure out what you're going to do next. And then the most OP skill for the warrior, especially up until the middle game, is Perfect Strike. This we're going to combine with Infernal Cry. Eventually you'll unlock a second empowered attack through Infernal Cry once you've upgraded it high enough. This means with single targets or bosses, and that will empower our attacks, eventually up to 2 or 3 of them, meaning our 1, 2, or 3 next attacks are extremely buffed in terms of damage, especially with the passive skill points we've taken. So you're then going to use Perfect Strike. You're going to charge that up until it's in its perfect timing window. You're then going to release it, and it's going to deal a ton of damage to bosses. Another thing you want to do is take your Ascendancy serious, because you can't change it. So your Ascendancy, you're going to want to go with the Titan Ascendancy. The other one, I don't know how I feel about it. For this build is insane. So the first two you're going to want to take is Slam skills get increased area of effect, and you're also going to want to take Earthbreaker, so 20% chance for your slam skills. You use yourself to cause aftershocks. Eventually we'll go into some of these other skills, but up until the middle game, these are the ones you're going to want to take because these are the only ones you'll have unlocked. But again, this is by far the best warrior build, especially early game. Check out either of these Path of Exile videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.